put it in your diary to do this week or this month. Please don't kick the can down the road, because there'll be a point in time when you're going to regret that if you don't have something in place, if you don't have something written down, if you don't have deputies in place. Okay, disaster can strike at any moment. Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Future Marketing UK. Thanks very much for joining me in this episode. Like previous episodes, we're going to be looking at the SWOT analysis for business. These are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunity and threats. And I tend to focus on the opportunities and threats that UK businesses can expect to occur this year. Now, my subject for this episode is single point failures, and this is actually a slight oddity in this series because single point failures can happen at any time in any year. So I'm not expecting 2025 to have any more single point failures than any other year, but it's something that businesses tend to sleepwalk into, or they forget, or whilst everything's working, it's not a problem, and they only worry about it if something breaks or a single point failure happens, and then they go running around like headless chickens, damaging their business in the process. So think of this episode as just a recap of what a good business should be doing, but it is also a healthy reminder for businesses who may have had it too good for too long, and they've kind of forgotten what to look out for. So the first point of a single point failure, and actually I'll just recap a little bit. What's this to do with marketing, you might be thinking? Well, it is the marketing role to specifically look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. That falls under marketing. The SWOT analysis is a marketing tool. And it is indistinguishable really from just good business practice. Okay, you are dependent on sales as a business, and it is one of your key roles as a business to make sure that people are looking out for opportunities and threats for that business. That is the role of marketing, and if somebody else is doing it, then effectively they are doing a role of marketing. It's normally done by a director or a business owner, but it's an aspect of marketing nonetheless. And it's really business critical. If you get an opportunity wrong, well then you don't have the growth you might have had. If you get a threat wrong, well that could very mean the end of your business. So the first point I want to touch upon is people. Okay, these are too easily overlooked whilst the single point failure person is operating well. They're physically well, they're mentally well, they can turn up for work. Whatever they do, they're the only person that can do it in their business, whether it's of a technical nature, not so much management, because in a crisis situation somebody could step in to manage a process, but so it's normally typically technically a focused role, or it could be that they have access to systems that no one else would necessarily know the password to, or only they know of certain people that can make certain things happen. But nonetheless, it's normally of a technical nature. So the way to look at this is, pretend you're creating for the first time a disaster recovery plan. Okay, now you can obviously download templates and stuff from the internet, but just in your mind, visually draw a piece of paper. Have a piece of paper, draw on it single point failures, and then a subtitle of people. Okay. Now, under people, think of if any one person in your business got run over by a bus. Okay, this is my favourite analogy. They just didn't turn up to work the next day, not necessarily dead, but just severely incapacitated for many, many weeks. Just go through your mind, for every single person that works for you, including yourself, if that happened, how would the business cope? Okay. Now, it's okay if your business gets a bit rocky, it's okay if other people have to step in, but does your business fundamentally function, or does it come to an absolute grinding halt? Now, you might be thinking, I'm the only one in my business. If I get run over by a boss, then no amount of planning can really avoid a single point failure. That is true, but if you're the only person working for a business, you've only got your wages to take into consideration, and in some respects, you could have insurance to cover you from such, odd disasters like being run over by a bus. So you could have insurance to cover you if you wanted to. Many people don't bother. So you've got this. So using this analogy, you might be write a list of everyone who works in your business under people, and just one by one say, if this person didn't turn up for many weeks, how would the business cope? Okay, now ring the names where if your answer to that question is yes, if this person didn't turn up for many weeks, the business would stop. Okay, the business can't continue. And ask yourself, how many weeks would that be of them not turning up or not doing your work? Would it be before, the brown stuff hit the fan? Okay, so have a think. So go through that list. So you've presumably you've circled one or two people. It normally is only just one or two people if it's a medium-sized business. Obviously, a larger business you might have more, but a larger business tends to have duplicates of every role. It's the small businesses that tend to rely on one or two people, and if they don't turn up for work for a few weeks, then that is a real problem. So ask yourself, what is it, if that person doesn't turn up, what is it that's going to cause disaster? If it's only them that have got access to a particular system, or they say, for example, they manage payroll and no one else knows how to log in and no one else is necessarily trusted with it, or it's a complicated process that only one person knows, then try to have an emergency deputy role for that. Okay, think hard about who else in the business, it could be you, that just needs to be shown the basic ropes how to do something. Make lots of notes in your book or piece of paper, and then subject yourself to a few hours training by this single point failure person. And so if they don't turn up for work for a few weeks, you can, if in an emergency, manage the basics of what they do. So like running payroll or doing something, or have somebody who could do it. So for example, taking payroll, for example, there's probably many people that would know how to run payroll. So again, familiarise yourself with maybe external companies like accountants or bookkeepers that could perform the role. Again, in an emergency, you'd still need the passwords and stuff, but that would mean that you don't have to learn how to use it. But it's always a good idea, if it's something that's business critical, at least have a deputy that can step in an emergency. Now, if the role is really difficult to step in, so it's a highly technical role, then, and there's no prospect of having a deputy for it, because by the time the deputy knows what they're doing, you spent weeks and weeks and weeks training them up. Now, this is no bad thing. Again, if it's business critical, it's always a good idea to have more than one person be able to do it. But if for example, you really can't do it, then consider some sort of insurance, some sort of disaster insurance which covers you specifically if a certain named individual can't come into work for any listed number of reasons. Really consider that insurance, because if insurance is going to be useful if that reality happens. Now, it might be really unlikely to happen. And again, there's nothing wrong with, again, on your piece of paper, sketching a very brief graph, just a vertical line and a horizontal line coming from the bottom of the vertical line, and on the y-axis you just have severity of impact, and on the bottom line you just have the likelihood of the impact. And really, the more to the right and to the top of that graph, you can put a dot on the paper and say this is the potential failure. So a key person can't come in for a few weeks, and they're business critical. And what's the likelihood of that happening? Well, take your pick. If it's a young person, or she's a young person, and does well to avoid buses, then the likelihood of that could be quite slim. Equally, if it's somebody of, a heart attack age, or somebody who's been run over by buses many times before, for example, you might want to give that slightly higher likelihood, and then the severity of that person not being there. So really try to create deputy roles, not day-to-day deputy roles, but emergency deputy roles. And every year, just try to get that deputy just refamiliarised with the job. So maybe this emergency deputy has to be subject to training once a year. Just repeat the exercise, getting to be shown the ropes every year. So it's okay. It's fresh in their minds. It's not something they sort of forget. And certainly, as I say, Pacific Insurance will play a role if you really can't provide sort of a deputy or backup or third-party backup for that sort of role. Okay, usually a technical role. Then we're gonna now talk about technology. So technology is something gets in the news quite often. That a bank has updated their systems, and lo and behold, no one can access their money. It's affected online banking, the apps, even their stores, even in their branches. Technology is obviously being more and more relied upon by businesses, and this includes AI, by the way. More and more companies are becoming reliant on AI. As strange as it seems, it's only been around for a year really, and some companies are already quite reliant on it. So, if the service went down and you don't get much warning, it can literally go down in a second for whatever reason. What's your plan? Is it the case you have to close shop? But how long are you going to close shop for? A lot of these problems can take days to fix. But for you'd like to think that for most businesses, you can probably close your operations for a few days and not suffer from business failure. But what's your backup plan? A good example. Do you have another business bank? Having two bank accounts could be an answer to that. Although, again, you'd want to look at that graph that you've got of likelihood versus severity and ask yourself, what's the likelihood of a bank being down or AI being down, or, what's the likelihood of it? Could be quite rare. But, again, consider the likelihood of it, consider the severity of it. If it's a free service, some business bank accounts are effectively free, others don't charge very much. Consider the benefits of having two bank accounts, or using two different AI tools, or if you've got some sort of CRM system, make sure that you've got some degree of service support, sort of 24-hour service support that you can call upon if something goes drastically wrong. You don't really want to have your head in the computer whilst your employees are running around like headless chickens. You want to be able to sort of delegate that to a CRM expert or something like that. So do consider levels of service agreements with things like if you use Sage or SAP or any of those sort of tools. Make sure you do have a good service level agreement, because the problem could be worldwide, or it could be just limited to you. Again, these technologies can break on a local basis if something's happened. And if it's business critical, then make sure you have some sort of backup, whether it's third-party backup or whether you've got somebody else in the business who you've made an expert in it, or you've got some sort of business failure insurance. And these are all things to think about, and try not to think about it too long, because the trouble with disaster recovery plans is they get written and filed into a drawer and then forgotten about. And in an event of a disaster, people even forget that you've got a disaster recovery plan, and it never even gets looked at. So try to, rather than just create a plan with time-dated actions. In other words, when are these actions got to be completed by, and then stick to it. And if you don't have time, delegate it to somebody else. Okay, to make sure that these are action points that they're done by a certain date. So if you decide you need insurance, you've got insurance. If you decide you need a deputy, then that deputy has to be appointed, made accountable, given the responsibility, and given a deadline to be familiar with that sort of platform or software service. And make sure that every year, put a date in your diary just to get that disaster recovery plan out of your dusty drawer and just go through it yourself and just ask yourself, is this still current? Have I taken on a new single point failure person in this business since last year? Have I taken out a new software service that I don't have a plan B if it goes wrong? So it's really important that you do this. And really the medium-sized businesses are the ones that need to most pay attention. If you're a sole trader, then if something happens to you, then yes, the business will be impacted. And really, you're quite limited. You could get friendly business partners or competitors to step in for you if you're very ill or you're recovering from being run over by a bus, or you could take out some insurance. But it is difficult, and for a very large company, as I say, you've got duplicates of people normally for everything, or whole teams of people doing the same thing. So again, if one or two people are taken out of the equation, then you've got the ability to carry on. So it's really for small medium-sized businesses that have to worry about this. We're going to talk about suppliers now, because suppliers are amazingly important to a lot of small businesses. Okay, we all do it. We all become very reliant on one or two suppliers for making key things, whether that's physical products or delivering raw materials or supplying a service. These are all suppliers, and I'm thinking more, maybe electrical suppliers, water suppliers. But also sort of physical goods like unfinished, sort of partly made products that are then, say, assembled into your main final product, like components or metalwork or whatever. So these are all critical things. Now, keep an eye generally on how they're doing. You could probably tell that if they're in trouble in terms of if they go bankruptcy. But for example, I'm going to touch upon this next week, but if a disaster strikes them, then there could be no warning that they're suddenly going to not be able to supply you. And so, you could ask to see their disaster recovery plan, but to be honest, that would probably make them go all prickly and wonder why you're asking to do that. But the best thing you can do is to have a plan B if that supplier is unable to deliver. Now, in terms of physical suppliers to your business, have another supplier lined up. Be on talking terms with them. Explain that you want them to be like an emergency supplier. Maybe even occasionally order from them to sort of keep that relationship alive. But you can explain to them, I just want an emergency backup. Okay, I don't mind, paying more per product, because I recognise it would be a temporary, may not be a temporary situation if the other supplier goes bust or gets demolished by some sort of natural disaster. But you should always have a backup plan if your key supplier goes under or can't deliver for a temporary amount of time. As for electricity, these things are a bit more fundamental. I don't know many businesses that don't need electricity. But if it's something that you really, really can't do without, so say a power cut will destroy many weeks of work for some reason, or so in other words, the power could be out for 5 minutes, and the power company doesn't think anything of it, but it's wrecked your entire process. It's you're growing crystals for some reason, or it's destroyed weeks and weeks of work. Do obviously consider having an uninterruptible power source, whether that be a diesel generator or some sort of backup solar battery or whatever. Again, you've probably already done this in that kind of regard, but just ask yourself, what would a 5-minute power cut do for you? Are you just going to lose 5 minutes work, or are you going to lose a week's work? And try to sort of plan. Same with water. Some companies have a very odd knee-jerk reaction. If the water is cut off, they've got to send everyone home. Okay, that's fine if you've got sturdy work at home options. If your staff are happy to work at home, that's fine. But try not to paint yourself into a corner too much. Consider whether you could get water imported in terms of drinking water from your local supermarket or something like that. If it's just for people to drink. Consider alternatives in case you have that sort of thing. And in a lot of cases, if it's a planned outage, or if the outage is not planned but for a very long time, then actually the water board should be offering your business free drinking water anyway. So always, if in doubt, contact the supplier and go, this is inconveniencing my business. what can you do about it? Okay. Now, obviously, a lot of suppliers might say, oh yes, we'll reimburse you for the water that you haven't used or can't use, and that might be measured in pounds and pence. But the impact it's had on your business could be multiples of that, and so make sure you get that point across. And if for some reason electricity or water supply or any other kind of utility like broadband or any kind of special utility to your business, if it's absolutely business critical, then again look at how you could cope without it, or what sort of service level agreement you could have with the supplier. I'm going to touch upon machines now. So machines that don't necessarily have to be high tech. It could be something that's never gone wrong before. It could be a very sturdy cast iron machine that just does its job day in, day out, never gone wrong. And suddenly it goes wrong, and it's a really key part of your production, or it's a very key part of your operation. And again, in your disaster recovery plan, what can you do? Have a think. What if this thing suddenly breaks down? Do you have the ability to contact somebody to repair it? Can you get another one easily? Is it time? Should you replace it anyway? Is this a 40-year-old machine that you should replace but just haven't got around to it yet? All these things are worth considering. The weather is also a big impact, and natural disasters as well. So these can all play a role in disruptions to your supply chain. The weather isn't something quite so much to worry about because it tends to be time limited. So heavy snow, flooding. I mean, yes, it can wash away your supply or your factory or something business critical, but in a lot of cases the damage is temporary. You can get it up and running again. So there's a difference between something being temporarily shut down and something being destroyed. And again, you should look at what are the options. Do you have insurance against that sort of thing? These are natural disasters, so it should be possible to get some sort of insurance to cover you against natural disasters. But insurance would generally just cover the cost of replacing something like a machine or a factory, rather than the time lost. So again, have a think about, is there any other suppliers that you could talk to and sort of pencil in as a sort of emergency backup. Natural disasters can also include things like volcanoes. Now, why do I mention volcanoes? Well, there is something a bit strange going on in the world at the moment. Certainly at the time of going to press, there's a huge supervolcano that everyone knows about under the Naples Bay area in Italy. And that is showing signs of renewed activity. And you're probably thinking, Andre, why on earth are you worrying about a volcano in Italy when you're dealing with UK businesses? Well, there's a number of reasons. I'm no specialist, but a lot of people are saying now it's going to blow up. Okay. Now, the immediate problem of this is that you will probably lose about 500,000 people, because Italy are not really taking it too seriously, and by the time they do, the damage will have been done. So you're going to have a political and a human shock to the Italian economy as the super volcano kind of explodes. And although it will certainly close businesses in and around the vicinity of the volcano, if it explodes anything like in the same sort of magnitude as Yellowstone, it could have a much wider, much deeper impact to the Italian economy. Or the ash and the dust clouds could shut down businesses, certainly temporarily, for a number of weeks in a wider Italian economy. So this, if you've got an Italian supplier and they're anywhere near Naples, within like 200 miles of Naples, then do consider this. Okay, the likelihood I'd say is quite low at the moment, but it's rising, and it's certainly, I would say, above 10% chance of it happening this year, if not considerably higher than that. So if you've got any kind of business critical links with businesses within 200 miles of Naples, then just be aware of this fact. There is another volcanic activity, very unusual volcanic activity near Santorini in Greece, but I can't see how this would impact UK businesses overly much. Luckily, most people have been evacuated from Santorini. Again, if it's another massive volcano, then that could cause some disruption if you depend on operations in Greece. There has been a number of earthquakes as well. Now, earthquakes are happening all the time around the world. Every few minutes there's an earthquake. But again, there has been some unusual activity globally, which I'm no specialist, so I can't say any more than that. But again, earthquakes are happening where maybe earthquakes haven't happened before. So again, if you've got a supplier that it would be prone to an earthquake, then just bear that in mind. The likelihood of that is obviously vanishingly small, so maybe just forget about that. But again, if you've got a supplier where a moderate earthquake would cause them severe problems, and again, have a look at, do you have a plan B for that? And that's all I'm going to cover today. So, as I say, this piece of paper that you've got in your mind, you've put some subtitles. You've put some subtitles like people, technology, suppliers, machines, weather, acts of God, as it were. And underneath those subheadings, you've rung a few, you've circled a few things that you think, yes, if that failed, my business would be in massive jeopardy. So there's, put it in your diary to do this week or this month. Please don't kick the can down the road, because there'll be a point in time when you're going to regret that if you don't have something in place, if you don't have something written down, if you don't have deputies in place. Okay, disaster can strike at any moment, and depending who it strikes, then the fallout could vary differently. And if you're not the shareholder of the business, then please think of the shareholders. If you are a shareholder of the business, then consider this as an investment into your future wealth, your future dividends. Just think of it as upfront investment, like any other type of investment. Okay, the spend has to be proportional to the benefits to the shareholders, so just keep that in mind. But really, there's not a lot of cost in drawing up a disaster recovery plan and having some conversations with maybe key alternative suppliers about the fact you want to have some sort of backup in case everything goes wrong. Okay. Right, so that really draws my this episode to a conclusion. Next week I'm going to be talking about government spend and the very possible government spending bonanza on defence and associated infrastructure, and actually how widely spread this spending opportunity can be of benefit to a very wide selection of UK businesses. So more of that next week. But thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this episode. And if you touched upon anything, then obviously do drop me a comment. If you've had your fingers burnt in the past through a lack of disaster recovery plan, let me know. If you've had any particular experiences with single point failures and you want to, share your experiences, and please put that into the comment below. Right, okay, thanks so much for listening, and see you next week. Goodbye.